Discover the touching truth: how sleeping on the floor changed one CEO's daughter's life forever. Samantha stared at the polished marble floors of her father's high-rise office and felt the weight of expectation pressing down on her. To the world, she was the perfect daughter, the bright-eyed college student whose father ruled the corporate landscape as a powerful CEO. But behind the veneer of designer clothes and overflowing trust funds, she grappled with a suffocating identity shaped by someone else's ambition. Today was supposed to be easy, her father was away again, and she was finally free to choose her own path. Yet the walls of her pristine suburban life loomed like a gilded cage, suffocating her spirit. With her mind racing, she took a breath, and a small flicker of rebellion ignited. Unsure yet determined, she signed up to volunteer at a nearby homeless shelter. No more living in the shadow of her father's legacy. She craved authenticity, something raw and unfiltered. The thought of sleeping on the floor, surrounded by people whose lives painted a stark contrast to hers, both terrified and exhilarated her. As she entered the shelter, the air was thick with stories waiting to be told. She quickly found solace in the shared tales of resilience among the men and women who laid down their burdens around her. Each night spent engaging with these unfamiliar faces pulled at her heartstrings, digging into the very fabric of her privilege. The stories of single mothers wafting between jobs and children, and veterans haunted by their pasts began to weave a different narrative for her life. She felt drawn into their struggles, ignited by a passion for social justice that threatened the polished existence crafted by her father. But there were echoes behind the smiles and internal conflict brewing as the guilt of her background seeped into her bones. She questioned the values instilled in her, the expectations burning a hole in her gut. Could she really confront the privilege of her upbringing? The emotional burden of knowing that every moment of connection at the shelter was tangled with the decision looming just up ahead, a gilded future waiting to swallow her whole. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Days turned into weeks, and as her new life at the shelter blossomed, her father returned to place a corporate opportunity in her hands. The ultimatum landed like a heavy weight, each word dripping with expectations: take the reins of the family business or risk shattering him completely. Panic surged. She felt trapped between what she was expected to embody and the burgeoning passion for real change stirring within her. She swayed back and forth, burdened by the decision. But then, a buried connection emerged that twisted the knife deeper: her father's past entwined with the shelter she had come to love so dearly. The revelation sent tremors through their relationship. Each glance exchanged was heavy with unspoken truths. Would she confront him? The tension mounted like a storm, tossing her feelings between anger and heartbreak. In the dim light of the shelter, amid the people she now considered friends, Samantha felt the weight of her old life pressing down against her chest. The question loomed over her: what kind of legacy would she choose, affluence or the authenticity grounded in human connection? As the air crackled with unspoken tension, Samantha knew that the precipice of understanding was near, yet she felt more uncertain than ever before. Would she be brave enough to leap into the unknown? The answer teetered on the edge, leaving an aching void as she contemplated her pivotal next move. The next morning, the sun spilled into the shelter, harsh yet illuminating. Samantha awoke to the buzzing energy of her new life, each sound a chat among volunteers, the crinkle of grocery bags, faint laughter reminding her of the stark contrast between this space and the sterile efficiency of her father's office. The warmth of the interactions around her filled her with a sense of purpose. Determined to push deeper into her relationship with the shelter, Samantha began participating in cooking sessions. The smells of simmering vegetables and spices grounded her, each slice of onion a deliberate act of connection. In these moments, she discovered a talent for organizing community meals. On the surface, it was simple: gather ingredients, bring people together, but it felt exhilarating. For the first time, she felt an undeniable sense of competence in a world that didn't revolve around corporate profit margins. As her confidence grew, Samantha turned her attention to the shelter's programming. She noticed an odd disparity: while stories of struggle filled the air, there were few resources available for those in need of job training or mentorship. An idea began to brew in her mind: a workshop series inviting local businesses to share skills, provide internships, and offer real pathways to employment. She couldn't ignore the guilt that accompanied her ambition. Each planning session pricked her conscience. Who was she to initiate change when she was inseparably woven into a tapestry of privilege? This duality became a source of nausea, her desire to help constantly wrestling with the unease of her own background. Still, the courage of the shelter's residents fueled her. Their stories, told around flickering candles, unfolded like blueprints for her, illustrating the strength it took to rise from the ashes. Each evening, as she lay on the cold, hardwood floor of the facility, she felt the weight of her life's decisions pressing. What could she do to blend her previous existence with this newfound ambition? In those moments of introspection, a plan began to shape. With her father increasingly distant, often returning home late after corporate gala events, she saw an opportunity unlike any before. She needed his connections to bring in businesses, leverage his influence for the benefit of others. This felt monumental and terrifying. Breaking the norm and venturing into a direct confrontation was far from her comfort zone. Yet, in a moment of fierce clarity, she resolved to invite him to the shelter. She would lay bare the profound impact this place had on her, and in turn, challenge him to help. Fueled by this decision, Samantha spent the following days drafting a proposal for her father, crafting the words carefully so they would convey both urgency and excitement. She didn't want him to feel attacked. Rather, she wanted to invite him into her world, a world he had unknowingly paved for her. As she sent the email, she felt a mix of trepidation and anticipation. Would he understand? Would he see beyond her plea? Personal transformation? But what if she received a cold rejection instead? That night, as she slept on the floor beneath a tattered blanket, engulfed in dreams of empowerment and connection, Samantha felt the tides shift. She had taken her first real step toward the edge of a new identity. As morning light broke through the windows, she prepared for any outcome. She held her breath, waiting for the email reply that could either shatter her world or bridge the gap between her two lives. Moments turned into hours, her heart racing with the uncertainty of possibilities. Then it pinged, the unmistakable sound of incoming mail. With shaking hands, she opened the screen, her heart throbbing like an engine on the verge of ignition. What awaited her behind that single click would determine not just her path, but the fate of the connections she had dared to embrace. The email blinked insistently on her screen, a harbinger of potential ruin or rebirth. Samantha felt a hot rush of anxiety creep up her spine as she glanced at the sender's name. Her father had always been a fortress of professionalism, his responses measured and cold, rarely indulging in the emotional depth she craved. With a deep breath, she clicked open the message, holding her breath as if the very action could influence its contents. As the cursive font spilled across the page, her eyes scanned for key phrases, her heart pounding with every word. "I appreciate your initiative, Samantha," it began, sounding almost mechanical. But as she read deeper, the notes of warmth began to intertwine with the formality. He acknowledged the shelter's work while expressing surprise at her passion. She could almost hear his voice in her head, curt yet puzzled, grappling with how his daughter's values seemed to diverge from his. Then came the pivotal moment, a tentative nod to meeting with her to discuss the proposal. A meeting. It was everything she had hoped for, yet so much more daunting than simply sending an email. The reprieve mingled with dread. This wouldn't just be a casual chat, it would be a confrontation of ideals, a reckoning of their relationship amidst the stark realities of her new life. What if he questioned her motives, ridiculed the very values she was beginning to embrace? But deep down, the exhilarating prospect of bridging the chasm between her two worlds urged her forward. She was prepared to stand her ground, to present her vision as a catalyst for change. In the ensuing days, preparing for the meeting consumed her thoughts. She visited the shelter more often, tapping into the shared stories of empowerment as fuel for her arguments. Watching the residents' resolve solidify her own, she practiced her pitch in the quiet corners of their shared space. As she stirred pots of simmering chili, she rehearsed her lines, embedding the tales of struggle and triumph into her presentation. When the meeting day arrived, everything hinged on her ability to extract a shift in perspective. Driving to the polished corporate building, she was acutely aware of the contrast between her current life and this place of her upbringing. Sharp suits and gleaming surfaces felt foreign against her more casual attire, a representation of the world she had left behind. Samantha entered his office, and the sterile air seemed to tighten around her. He sat behind a vast mahogany desk, the embodiment of authority and distance. Yet today, she was determined to dissolve that barrier. "Dad," she started, her voice steadying as the words pushed their way out. "I wanted to show you what I've been working on." As she laid out her plans, the workshops, the partnerships, the potential impact, she noticed his expression shift from skepticism to intrigue. With each detail, she felt the strength of her convictions. They engaged in a heartfelt dialogue that stretched across the contours of ethics, privilege, and responsibility. His responses shifted from measured curiosity to genuine engagement. But shadows remained. While he opened up on his thoughts about collaboration, an undercurrent of indifference lingered, revealing the tensions wrought from their disparate worlds. Would he truly commit to this cause, or was this merely a passing phase in her idealism? As tumultuous as the process felt, Samantha emerged from the meeting with renewed clarity. She had confronted her father, yet what lay ahead still loomed ominously. The task of translating their private discourse into a concrete plan now rested on her shoulders. Hours later, as she returned to the shelter, the contrasts twisted in her mind, her father's world on one side, the intimate fabric of support there on the other. She was shaping something bigger than herself, yet the interplay of influence and intent continued to provoke her discomfort. Was she ready for the challenges to come? The influence she sought could just as easily reinforce her privilege as it could empower others. The decision of how to navigate that balance felt precarious. Tomorrow would bring another meeting, more connections to forge. A colossal opportunity stood on the horizon, but so did a looming question: how would she reconcile her intentions with the arrangement she was venturing into? Samantha sighed, contemplating the half-built bridge she stood on. Each step extended into uncertainty, yet she could feel the winds of change pressing against her back. The moment had arrived for deeper challenges. How would she wield this newfound power without losing what had drawn her to this mission in the first place? Samantha stood in front of the mirror, her fingers brushing against the fabric of her blouse. Today was a new meeting, a continuation of threads she began weaving with her father, but this time it would be different. The boardroom awaited, filled with professionals who would not only scrutinize her ideas but also measure her readiness to exert influence in a world she had idealized from afar. Her past was creeping too close, teetering on her insecurities like a balance beam, demanding every ounce of her resolve. The morning had been a flurry of absolute chaos: emails demanding immediate responses and calls from volunteers wanting to update her on last-minute adjustments for the upcoming workshops. Each message was a reminder of the complexity she was taking on. Yet, with every frantic moment, a resolution grew in her heart. She wasn't merely presenting to her father anymore, she was advocating for a cause that mattered. Samantha took a deep breath, recalling the faces of those at the shelter, their vulnerability a stark juxtaposition to the polished, closed-off demeanor of corporate leaders. The gravity of her role weighed heavily on her as she answered each question during the ride, rehearsing her responses like a script infused with genuine conviction. Upon arrival, the stark lines of the glass-faced building loomed in her view. A structure representing a world of wealth and power, laden with the implications of her father's position. Once inside, She felt the environment shift around her, a cacophony of conversations combined with the clinking of coffee cups and the rustle of paper. Each sound pulled at her, further pushing her ambition into action. As she stepped into the boardroom, a flurry of eyes swept over her, men and women clad in shades of gray and black, the embodiment of seriousness. Here, she was no longer just his daughter, she was a player eager to enter the game. "Thank you for meeting with me," she began, clearing her throat. Gravity hung in the air as the head of the board nodded, prompting her to launch into her presentation. Visual aids adorned the screen behind her, statistics paired with heartfelt narratives. But she wasn't just sharing numbers, she was presenting a vision deeply rooted in the struggles she had witnessed, a call to action that blended her experience at the shelter with tangible corporate responsibility. The tension filled the room like static electricity, her pulse swiftning as she gauged the reactions: curiosity, skepticism, and a hint of interest. Throughout the discussion, her father's expression remained unreadable, but the board members exchanged glances, murmuring. There were questions, sharp, probing, but with each challenge, Samantha felt fortified, her arguments resonating with fierce conviction, the warmth of those stories pulsing through her veins. But there was also doubt lurking within her. Were these individuals genuinely engaged, or merely performing the ritual of corporate meetings? Did they understand the gravity of social responsibility, or were they merely exploiting trends for profit? With each inquiry directed at her, she felt a mounting pressure, a challenge to deliver a satisfactory resolution to their probing skepticism. When the meeting drew to a close, the head of the board leaned back, contemplating. There was a silence that seeped through the air. Was it surprise, or mere politeness in the face of her apparent audacity? Samantha's confidence wavered like a flickering candle. "Your approach is fresh," but he began. The word hung ominously, and her heart raced as thoughts raced. Was it too early? Had she reached too far? "You understand, of course, that real change requires commitment beyond ideas. How can we align our corporate goals with your passions without losing our bottom line?" His words struck deep, awakening the very doubt that had haunted her since she embarked on this journey. The reality of her father's world juxtaposed against her mission was intense, forcing her to confront the truth: could she bring about change while also navigating this intricate dance of power and privilege? As she absorbed his question, the fragile bridge she had begun to build wobbled under the pressure of her internal struggle. Did she want to leave her mark or simply seek approval? A swell of determination arose as her aspirations wrestled within her, an urge not just to advocate but to dismantle barriers that tethered her, to an unease that threatened to paralyze her passion. "Ensure everyone understands the stakes both for themselves and the people we aim to serve," she finally offered, a light catching in her eyes as clarity began to emerge. The challenge reached beyond her ambitions, it now rested on redefining her decisions moving forward. As she exited the meeting, Samantha couldn't shake the feeling that the point of no return lay ahead. Tomorrow would bring her to pivotal crossroads, where the choices she made could either harness her family's influence or relinquish her ideals along the way. Would she find the right equilibrium, or would this venture cripple the very essence of her mission? Samantha stepped out of the boardroom, her mind racing, a tempest of thoughts swirling around her. Failure wasn't an option, it loomed like a shadow over any misstep she contemplated. Could she convince the board that compassion and corporate objectives weren't mutually exclusive? Each pulse in her temple echoed the head of the board's last question, pressing against her consciousness like an unwanted rhythm. Real change required more than innovative ideas; she needed to rethink her entire approach. As the day slipped into afternoon, Samantha returned to her office, the space still infused with the morning's energy. She took a moment to look around, the framed photographs of her past, trophies from debates showcasing her prowess in communication, and notes plastered on the walls, remnants of her ambitious plans. Yet, they felt hollow now. Each accomplishment echoed an expectation she had chased rather than a genuine expression of who she was meant to be. For the first time, they seemed less like milestones and more like a mask she wore in a world that demanded perfection. A knock on her door interrupted her reverie. It was Mark, one of the volunteers she'd collaborated with at the shelter. She saw the concern cloud his features as he stepped inside, his hands fidgeting with the sleeve of his shirt. "Hey, are you okay?" "I heard about the meeting," he said cautiously. "Yeah," she replied, forcing a smile. "It went well enough." Mark's eyes searched hers, attempting to penetrate the fabricated calm. "You know, you shouldn't worry so much about fitting into their world. You're already doing amazing work." She leaned back in her chair, the weight of his words almost palpably drawing her. "What if I'm doing it wrong? What if their world isn't ready for my ideas? You have to ask yourself if this is about acceptance or change. They need you to push their boundaries. It's not about what they want to hear, it's about what needs to be done." His words ignited something within her, a flame of purpose that had nearly flickered out in the boardroom. She nodded slowly, appreciating the clarity Mark offered through his honesty. It necessitated a shift in her perspective. This wasn't a battle to win but a journey to reshape thought. What if I could make them see this differently? Samantha mused aloud, tapping her fingers against her desk. What if those corporate goals could align with real, vulnerable lives? What if I speak their language without losing mine? Mark smiled, a spark of encouragement igniting in his eyes. "You speak from a place of truth. It's authentic. That's how you cut through the noise." Empowered by his affirmation, she felt the contours of her ideas reshaping into something concrete. Perhaps she needed to redefine the dialogue. Instead of positioning her social goals as separate from corporate interests, she could frame them as complementary. Samantha envisioned a plan that highlighted real-world impact, documented outcomes that translated the struggles of individuals at the shelter into quantifiable benefits for the corporation. She scribbled notes furiously, a flurry of ideas pouring from her pen, a data-driven map that could weave storytelling with strategies that appealed to the board's agenda. The overwhelming prospect of her initial uncertainty began to dissolve, replaced by exhilarating determination. After sending out a few emails, she decided to dive headfirst into research, gathering statistics and case studies to fortify her revised pitch. A sense of urgency pulsated through her veins as she eyed the clock, recognizing the possibility of turning her vision into reality. But amidst this newfound clarity, darker thoughts whispered insidiously. Would her father regard her evolving stance as defiance? Would he dismiss her if she challenged the status quo he had long upheld? The fear of alienating her family began to creep back, restless and insistent. If she took this risk, could she endure the potential fallout? Samantha closed her eyes, inhaling deeply as she sought balance in the maelstrom. Tomorrow's presentation became a critical moment, an opportunity vital not just for the shelter, but for her growing identity. She would have to tread carefully. A dynamic shift demanded not just courage, but a re-examination of her perceived loyalty. The sun had long dipped below the horizon when she finally stood, her resolve crystallizing. She would face the board again, not as her father's daughter but as an advocate with undeniable purpose. The moment of truth loomed ahead, a precarious precipice of personal ambition and professional reality. Did she dare to embrace the challenge that lay before her? Would the world she sought to change welcome the boldness of her vision, or would it demand she play a different game entirely? Samantha awoke to the soft light filtering through her office window, the remnants of last night's strategizing still fresh in her mind. The weight of expectation felt heavier than the previous day's burdens, but now it was coupled with a flicker of determination. Today was not just another day, it was the day she would confront the board with her vision, splicing compassion with corporate success. As she prepared for the presentation, a sense of urgency propelled her movements. At her desk, she replayed the key points of her pitch in her mind, the statistics that illustrated how corporate social responsibility fostered employee satisfaction, how real-world success stories from the shelter could become case studies for the company's values. She envisioned leading the board through her meticulously crafted narrative, guiding them toward the realization that financial success and human well-being could exist hand in hand. Doubt threatened to suffocate her resolve. What if they dismissed her ideas, reducing them to naive idealism? What if her father's influence loomed larger than her own voice? She couldn't afford to be a shadow of someone else's legacy any longer. Gathering her materials, she took deliberate, grounding breaths, channeling an inner strength she had cultivated over the years. As she entered the boardroom, the atmosphere felt charged. The usual sterile ambience was now punctured with an electric anxiety. Her heart raced, but rather than retreating into her well-rehearsed persona, Samantha steeled herself. She was prepared to advocate for those whose stories had been silenced. "Thank you all for being here," she began, the tremor in her voice steadied by purpose. Earning attention, she launched into her presentation, seamlessly weaving data into personal narratives. The room was a battleground, and she wielded her words as weapons to dismantle preconceived notions about profits and philanthropy. Midway through, she noticed raised eyebrows and expressions of surprise from her colleagues. Emboldened, she transitioned her pitch with greater vigor, bringing to life the struggles of individuals she had encountered at the shelter. "These are not just statistics," she emphasized, "but lives transformed. Imagine if our company became synonymous with compassion in action. This is not merely an ethical orientation, it's a strategic advantage." Samantha felt the tide turning. The rigid responses began softening, heads nodded almost imperceptibly as they engaged with her earnestness. Empowered by that connection, she deepened her arguments, tracing the parallels between beneficial corporate practices and human impact. Yet, there was one challenge she hadn't anticipated. This time, it was not the board opposing her but a single voice: her father. "But what guarantees do you have?" he asked coolly, cutting through the atmosphere like a knife. "You think that's enough to sway investors? You're idealizing a dream." His voice echoed in her mind, a complex web of familial loyalty and professional duty tangling around her. She had come to expect resistance, yet this confrontation struck like lightning. "Dad, it's about more than guarantees," she replied, standing taller now. "It's about a choice. A choice we make to either uphold the status quo or pave a new path, even when the forecasts look uncertain. Isn't that worth fighting for?" A silence enveloped the room. Samantha's pulse thundered in her ears as she scanned the board, searching for signs of receptivity. She could feel her father's disapproval like a weight, but a different kind of strength surged forth. This was no longer just a presentation, it was her declaration of self-worth and a call to action for change. Walking that thin line of respect and defiance, she pressed on, driven by an unexpected self-acceptance. Speaking overtly from her heart, she didn't cite further statistics. Instead, she told them about a child she met at the shelter who learned to dream despite the confines of circumstance. As she concluded, she could see by the sudden shift in the board's demeanor that her vulnerability struck a chord. Now, one final thought lingered heavily in the air: the pivotal moment ahead was not just about the meeting but about whether she could redefine her relationship with her father and the expectations tethered to him. Samantha stood poised for any response, her breath shallow. Would they join her in this bold new vision, or would her father's shadow eclipse her ambitions once more? The answer hung in uncertainty, revealing not just the corporate future but the potential for a profound personal breakthrough. The silence in the boardroom felt like a chasm, stretching between them. Samantha's heart raced, each beat amplifying the stakes of her proposal. Surveying the faces of her colleagues, she quickly recognized a mix of surprise and contemplative nods. It was evidence of a crack in the rigid front she had feared. Yet, her father's piercing gaze bore into her, a reminder of the burden of legacy she carried. "Courage can be misinterpreted as recklessness," he challenged, his voice steady yet disappointed. "And your proposal lacks the financial guarantees we need." With each word, a fire ignited within her. Samantha could sense a tipping point approaching. She had devoted years molding herself to fit into the corporate mold, hidden behind a veneer of compliance. Today, she had torn away those confines. "What guarantees did anyone have when they took a chance on me?" she shot back, a hint of defiance lacing her tone. "Do we measure life in guarantees, or do we measure it in impact?" There's a way to innovate our business ethos that brings us respect and gives a voice to those who've been silenced. The board shifted uncomfortably, their focus intensified. Some exchanged glances, gauging reactions. It was a risk she hadn't prepared to take, yet it felt liberating. Her candidness unleashed a wave of honesty that crackled through the air, and she refused to let her father's skepticism undermine her strength. A fresh thought crystallized in her mind. She realized her father's disdain had rooted deeper than she had allowed herself to acknowledge. This entitled confidence he projected hung like a shadow over her. As if reading her thoughts, he leaned forward, pinning her down with an unwavering stare. "You romanticize the plight of the underprivileged," he said. "You cannot afford to conflate compassion with business strategy." "Maybe it's time we stop thinking of the two as separate," she replied, scrambling to maintain her composure. "You taught me to be strategic, but everything you've taught me is built on outdated paradigms. Compassion is a strong strategy. We can shape our company into a leader because of that compassion." Samantha's breath hitched, realizing how her words reflected not only her professionalism but her plea for understanding as a daughter. She was caught in an intricate dance of ambition and familial resolution. The board remained silent, reflecting in her intensity. That silence was an opportunity, a pregnant pause where new possibilities could germinate. Unsure if the silence was forgiveness or acceptance, she pressed on. "Many companies are thriving by focusing on their social impact. We could lead the charge. Imagine being that trailblazer." Destiny shifted in the muted room. The backing of her colleagues now felt like an unpredictable tide, both empowering and frightening. Rapidly, she began restructuring her framing, infusing hope into every business opportunity she suggested. Could their corporate identity genuinely pivot towards altruism? The more she articulated her vision, the more clarity she found for herself, no longer grappling with uncertainty. She gestured to the whiteboard, filled with snippets of profit and loss statements, juxtaposed against uplifting stories of lives transformed. "We could develop programs reflecting our corporate ethos, establishing partnerships that would not only uplift communities but enhance our brand." The atmosphere in the room flickered with energy, her words igniting inspiration rather than defense. Yet she was painfully aware of one unresolved question that lurked in the shadows: would her father's resolute traditionalism drown her efforts? As her pitch surged forward, a quiet resolve settled over her. She needed to step beyond the constraints imposed by family and tradition. Samantha sensed a pivotal moment within her, an awakening that came as much from the board meeting as from her tumultuous relationship with her father. "Risk often comes before rewards," she concluded, her voice steady and clear. "But isn't that where true innovation thrives? We have the chance to break boundaries, to reimagine our legacy." The board members shifted again, and through the anxious silence, she could feel the weight of a decision looming. With her heart in her throat, she faced her father once more. Would he choose to stand beside her in this newfound understanding? A revelation loomed ahead, a matter of choice that would define not just her professional future, but her relationship with the man she had tried so hard to impress. She felt the tension mount, each second heavy with the promise of either collaboration or confrontation. In that moment, everything hung in the balance: her aspirations, their plans, her future. Would her father accept this new vision, or would he attempt to pull her back into the dense shadows of expectation? The answer was inching closer, anticipated like the crack of dawn breaking across a lingering night. Samantha leant back slightly, her fingers gripping the edge of the table as she sensed the board's shifting dynamics. She disrupted their equilibrium, and now, the air felt charged with anticipation. Would her father acknowledge her? Or would he recede into the comfort of his dated beliefs, dismissing her efforts in one quick, biting comment? Inwardly, she steeled herself for any fallout, questions surging through her mind. But instead of waiting for his retort, she pushed onward, channeling her nervous energy into her next thought. "We need to change our narrative. Let us be leaders who care for our stakeholders, not just our shareholders. We can make the bottom line meaningful beyond mere numbers." The boardroom lights bathed her in brightness as the shadows of self-doubt lightened. If business was about growth, hadn't she spent her life growing at the intersection of ambition and compassion? The boldness of her proposition was radical, she understood that now. Yet a counterintuitive sense of stability washed over her. This could redefine her existence, her role in the firm, and in her family's legacy. Imagine if we focused on sustainability and social good as core pillars, Samantha continued, her heartbeat steadying. We can measure success not just in profit margins but in community impact. Picture our brand becoming synonymous with kindness, a beacon that other companies strive to emulate. Doesn't that inspire you? A slight murmur rippled through the room, the board members sharing furtive glances, evidently considering her words. Yet her mind latched onto one dissenting voice, her father's. He broke the silence with a calculated air. Compassion is admirable but must not eclipse prudence. We need to think strategically. Can you justify how we maintain our market position? Frustration flared. Dad, this is the strategy. If we ignore this shift in consumer behavior, we risk obsolescence. We can't remain stagnant, counting the same dollar through outdated methods. Her voice wavered, but clarity crystallized within her at that moment. Though they were mere words, they bore a deeper truth: she wasn't just standing on her own. This was about laying bare her growing self-awareness, authentic and unfiltered. Let us brainstorm, she urged the room. What if we connected with organizations that align with our vision? If we built collaborating bridges instead of walls, we'd be creating opportunities. We could even offer incentives for employee engagement in community projects. Wouldn't that create a stronger, more dedicated workforce? Samantha caught a glimpse of her father's face, unease flickering across it. It made her acutely aware that the battle was as much about reshaping legacy as it was about reshaping business ethics. Yet, she saw something else, an inkling of respect beneath his external barriers. Could he genuinely be swayed? One colleague raised a hand, hesitant but intrigued. What kind of programs are we envisioning? Are we able to determine the ROI from social impact initiatives? This was the moment she'd been waiting for, interest sparked among her colleagues. Absolutely. We can design metrics around our social programs. Employ analytics that capture both qualitative and quantitative results. It's about creating a dual narrative. Her confidence grew, each word became a brick in a burgeoning foundation of her vision. There was power in collaboration, an alignment she hadn't fully realized until now. This could indeed be the start of genuine change, not just within the firm, but within her relationship with her father. As the board began deliberating and sharing ideas, Samantha felt a shift. She was no longer the apprehensive daughter seeking approval but an earnest innovator carving out her own space in a family legacy. But there remained a lingering uncertainty that clawed at her stomach. How far was she truly willing to go to embrace this newly forged identity? Would she continue to stand firm against lingering family expectations, or would she ultimately bend under the weight of heritage? With the spirit of resolve surging through her veins, she took a deep breath, consciously stepping into her authority once more. The momentum she'd sparked needed to be championed outside this room, yet shadows of doubt still loomed in her mind. The door clicked as it opened, and Samantha looked up to see her father standing. This was not just a doorway, it felt like a moment teetering on the brink of colossal change. What would he say next? His next words could tilt the balance either way, her dreams or legacy hanging in the balance. Samantha held her breath, the boardroom suddenly feeling suffocating. Her father's presence, typically a source of strength, now radiated a formidable tension. He walked toward her, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Part of her wanted to retreat, to let the old traditions unfold in their usual way, but the other part, this new, awakened version of herself, urged her to stand firm. Your vision is compelling, Samantha, he finally said, his voice steady yet laced with an edge of skepticism. But this isn't just about ideas. This is about the numbers. Panic washed over her. Would he dismiss her entire proposal based on cold calculations? Yet, there was a flicker of something she hadn't expected: curiosity or maybe hope. "Dad, it can be both. We can be innovative and profitable," Samantha insisted, each word emerging with more conviction than the last. "Think of Patagonia, a company whose commitment to social responsibility has garnered outstanding loyalty and impressive growth. We can learn from their approach." The flicker of intrigue deepened as several board members leaned in, captivated by her argument. She felt the weight of their eyes, now allied with her goal. This was the breakthrough she needed. "Let us conduct market research," persisted the same cautious colleague from earlier. "Understanding how consumers perceive social responsibility could provide us with tangible justification for change." Her heart raced. This was a rallying cry, a coalition beginning to form behind her ideas. They were beginning to envision the reality she proposed. But as exhilaration surged within her, so too did the weight of potential setbacks. "Don't forget, Samantha," her father interjected, choosing his words carefully, "change is risky. What if we invest in this and fail? Our reputation, our legacy could suffer." The legacy. The weight of that word pressed down harder than the boardroom table she clutched for stability. "Dad, we risk becoming irrelevant if we don't evolve," she countered, summoning every ounce of courage. "People want to support brands that reflect their values. Failing to adapt could ultimately harm our legacy more than embracing change ever could." Her words, edged with passion, hung in the air, echoing a point that needed to be said. This wasn't merely a business venture, it was an evolution of who she was and what her family stood for. In that moment, she realized that the stakes had never felt higher. Was she really prepared to stake her family's legacy on an uncertain future? The road ahead was fraught with potential failure, but the alternative felt stifling. As discussions continued, her father remained silent, processing the implications of her argument. Doubts flickered through her mind. Had she truly straddled the line between innovation and tradition, or had she inadvertently set herself up to combat a legacy she had spent her life trying to honor? Sweat gathered at her palms, her breath shallow as she rehearsed the words that could alter the fabric of her family. Grappling with anxiety, she needed this moment to redefine who she was, not just as a daughter, but as a leader. "Samantha," spoke another board member, redirecting her focus. "What about internal resistance? Change isn't as simple as enticing stakeholders. Culture has to shift, and that starts from the ground up." The room held its breath. What had she considered in regards to their corporate culture? Would employees accept her proposal? The question loomed large over her newfound confidence. "I'll engage with our team," she vowed, resolve hardening her voice. "We'll hold sessions to understand their perspectives, ensuring everyone feels connected to this vision. It's a gradual change, but if done right, it can unify us." Her father's gaze fell upon her, a mixture of appraisal and challenge. "Are you prepared for pushback?" His tone signaled no mere inquiry, he expected an answer that illuminated her readiness. The air thickened around her as thoughts raced through her mind. She envisioned team meetings filled with skepticism, doubts, but also excitement. Change could damage trust, or it could forge stronger relationships, making them all stakeholders in this transformation. "I am," she replied, voice steady but her heart pounding. "We'll grow together, or we'll fail together. But we will try." With that declaration, Samantha knew she had crossed a threshold, not just in their discussion but within herself. She looked at her father, determination in her eyes, seeking his reaction. Would he offer support or again detour into traditional confines? This uncharted territory held potential, yet the uncertainty of failure clawed at her resolve. Deep within, she feared the reaction from employees, the probationary feedback from stakeholders, and even the rippling effects on her family. The meeting felt like a weighty curtain drawing down on her performance, yet what lay behind it was veiled in mystery. Samantha sensed the shift within her not merely as a detail of business strategy, but as an embodiment of personal evolution. She had ventured far beyond just appealing to the board. This was a trembling step into authenticity. But what truly awaited her on the other side of this tentative victory? Samantha stood at the precipice of transformation, the culmination of her journey reflected in the resolute faces surrounding her. The boardroom had transformed from a daunting arena into a collaborative space, her ideas taking root and flourishing in shared purpose. The vulnerability she displayed had led not only to self-acceptance but an awakening in her peers. They now followed her lead toward an ambitious, shared vision. As discussions wrapped up, her father's appraisal felt like an unwelcome weight. Despite his traditional mantra of fiscal pragmatism, she detected something new, a glimmer of respect. "Samantha, you have taken bold steps today," he acknowledged, the tone a mix of reverence and surprise. "Perhaps there is merit in your approach after all." Overwhelmed by a sense of validation, Samantha felt a wave of pride wash over her. She had faced down the legacy that had threatened to define her, and instead emerged, not merely as the CEO's daughter, but as a catalyst for change. The disconnect she had felt began to dissolve, revealing a potential for mutual understanding. Days turned into weeks, and Samantha poured her energy into implementing her initiatives at the shelter. The workshops she envisioned materialized through the very connections she once feared to leverage. Businesses honorable enough to recognize the impending shift responded positively, offering mentorship and employment opportunities, transforming lives. The programs blossomed, now woven into the fabric of her corporate identity and the lives of those she sought to empower. With every successful storytelling round during her community meals, she witnessed the enthusiasm in the shelter residents. They would speak of their aspirations now tethered with real pathways, emboldened to reach for dreams that once felt out of grasp. Each labored moment in the kitchen became an act of profound connection, a touchstone between her two worlds. She savored every slice and served every plate, finding fulfillment that surpassed her wildest ambitions. Samantha returned to the board each month, armed with newly collected data that clearly illustrated her project's impact. Her approach had evolved. She harnessed the dual narrative of profit and purpose, a strategic initiative now embraced by every board member. Their buy-in felt like a communal triumph. She knew she was transforming not just company culture, but her own legacy. Finally, the day arrived when she presented the tangible success derived from their initiatives. The numbers reflected not just revenue growth, but deeper employee satisfaction and community involvement. Samantha stood confidently, ready to unveil her findings. The board listened attentively, their reactions varied yet affirming. When she finished, her father stood, a long silence preceding his words. "You have accomplished something remarkable, Samantha," he said, the weight of his past expectations seemingly melting away. "Your vision has substantial merit, and you've demonstrated true leadership in bridging the gap between corporate responsibility and social impact. I'm proud of you." The approval surged through her. This wasn't merely about business success, it was a cathartic moment, a defining validation of her individuality. She had bravely navigated the complexities around privilege and ideals, and articulated her yes to authenticity, celebrated not just by the board but also those in the shelter. This new dynamic in her life reflected profound personal growth. No longer was Samantha adrift in the expectations of others, she had anchored herself as a leader, capable of inspiring change within the systems she once felt confined by. She was no longer solely the product of her father's ambition but had emerged as a significant contributor to that legacy, a legacy infused with empathy and service. Now, she sat amidst the success she had built, ready to shape what the future could hold, not just for her daughter's journey, but for the many others she had guided along the way. Life had become a tapestry of connection far richer than anything she had previously known. Samantha had effectively sewn together the strands of her upbringing and her new direction, embodying both the privilege she was born into and the authenticity she had fought for. This was her moment. A true transformation had taken shape. You need to subscribe now to witness more powerful transformations. This is the moment to show your support by tapping that like button. Every click genuinely matters. Comment below with your reactions and theories about this incredible journey. And don't wait even one more second to share this story with at least 5 friends who need to see how one person can change everything.